Welcome to A Guide to Every Deck in EDH. Today we're looking at Bruna, Light of Alabaster. So Bruna is a 6 mana commander. She's an Azorius, and she's a 5/5 flying vigilance that says, whenever she attacks or blocks, you may attach to it any number of auras on the battlefield, and you may put onto the battlefield attached to it any number of auras that could enchant it from your graveyard or hand. So a number of hoops to jump through here. First, obviously, our commander is quite expensive at 6 mana. Secondly, this is not an ETB trigger. She does have to attack in order to get this going. So we probably want a form of haste on Bruna so that she can get this immediately. Next after that, we're going to want a lot of looting effects in order to turn through cards and put auras into our graveyard. Since it doesn't matter whether the auras are in our hand or in the graveyard, we can get them all back with Bruna. And so the main plan here is basically to Voltron a bunch of auras onto Bruna and try to one-shot opponents with her. So with that said, let's start with our beatdown cards. We've got all the various cards that you would expect, like All That Glitters in Ethereal Armor, Auramancer's Guise, Battle Mastery, Eldrazi Conscription, although it's worth noting here the Annihilator won't trigger the first time since she will already be attacking when this comes into play attached to her. And then Steel of the Godhead, so Bruna is already flying, but that doesn't necessarily mean our opponents won't have any flyers, so this can make her just straight up unblockable, and the lifelink is nice too. Especially since she has Vigilance, so it makes it very hard for opponents to attack us back. Then we've got a bunch of filtering effects, things like Careful Study, Frantic Search, Ledger Shredder, and so on. Some card draw, especially things that wind up discarding because we don't care if the auras are in our graveyard, so cards like Thirst for Knowledge and Thirst for Meaning are pretty good. Some number of counter spells, some fast mana to get Bruna out faster, hopefully. Now, our options for haste in blue and white are pretty limited, so we've got, obviously, Lightning Greaves being the best one, but we also have access to things like Call the Bandit Lord and Crashing Drawbridge. Straightforward Azorius lands, not too much to see here. Now, Pariah is here to be the Pillow Fort card, so one of the main questions you might say is, let's say we've got Bruna into play and we've got a bunch of auras on her and we attack somebody and like one-shot an opponent, but we still have 2 other opponents. Well, surely it wouldn't be such a big deal if they attack us back. I mean, after all, Bruna is really big, possibly has lifelink due to something like Steel of the Godhead. Isn't that enough to just block our opponents? Well, let's say our opponents have a significant board, you know, a really big board of creatures. Maybe they cast like Craterhoof Behemoth or something. It's not necessarily the case that Bruna being really big with lifelink will even necessarily let us survive. And there's also the problem of, let's say our opponents attack, we block their biggest creature, and then before damage, they do something like, you know, Swords to Plowshares their own guy, right? Now we're not going to gain any life, and so we can potentially die that way. So Pariah just allows us to subvert that and put all of the damage onto Bruna instead, and Bruna should be big enough or have protection that the damage is not going to kill her. Then we've got our protection spells, so Bruna really needs to not get countered or killed, so we've got all the cards that allow us to do that. And in particular, some cards worth highlighting are Shielded by Faith, which gives her indestructible, so she'll survive a bunch of sweepers. Spectra Ward, which gives her pro all colors. This is relevant in combination with Pariah, obviously, to negate all of the damage, but also just makes her immune from removal. And then Vanishing is the card that, while it does cost us double blue in order to activate, we can phase her out, meaning that absolutely nothing can touch her. So let's say our opponent has a sweeper that gets around indestructibility, you know, maybe something like Cyclonic Rift, for example, we can just phase her out, and then nothing touches her. Bunch of ramp spells, obviously. Mantle of the Ancients, which is not only a big pump, but reanimates all of the auras. So Bruna herself does reanimate all of the auras, but this is just another way of doing it. There's also the possibility that Bruna gets killed or countered enough times that she just becomes too expensive, so we can mantle onto some other creature in our deck. Bunch of removal. It's also worth noting here that Treachery is mainly here so that when Bruna attacks, you can reanimate the Treachery on her and then untap 5 of your lands. So that will allow us to have mana open the turn that we play Bruna, and then we can have, you know, counter spells open or just anything else that we need. We do need some sweepers of our own. Some of these won't even affect Bruna if we manage to give her indestructible. And we've got Torpor Orb here because we don't have a single creature in our deck with an ETB trigger other than Witch Enchanter, which is a land. And then a little bit of tutoring. So to restate, the plan is get Bruna out, hopefully with haste, after having filtered through a bunch of auras into our graveyard, attack, Voltron everything onto Bruna, and start one-shotting our opponents. And so with all that said, that is going to do it for Bruna, Light of Alabaster in EDH.